Welcome to Courage to Change with Karen. I'm Karen and I'm your host today. I am really excited. We've been reading Let Go Now by Karen Casey. And Karen Casey also wrote a meditation book called Each Day a New Beginning. You might have that in your library. I love the way she's coming at this topic of detachment. She's not only giving us suggestions on how to detach, but she is giving us more of the understanding of what detachment even is. And I am really enjoying it. I hope you are too. Please let me know. Um I really, I have really grown so far, and we've only done this a few weeks, but last week I had a huge aha moment. If you didn't listen to that episode, go back and listen. It's different than my usual lessons because it's more like you're listening to me in a therapy group. I'm working it out as I'm talking. And I think that happens a lot. I do like that about 12 step groups is sometimes I'm working it out as I'm actually sharing. And it's interesting when someone does that because you can actually see it. You can see it in their face, you can hear it in the tone of their voice, and they're actually working through it themselves. And I think that's the most powerful kind of therapy is when it comes from within. When you're having your own aha moments and someone's not telling you what your aha moment is. And that is why I love the 12 steps and Al Anon and Naranon and Gamanon and all the support groups, all the people that show up every day to make sure that the next guy, has a helping hand. So, I'm loving this book. I want to read to you today something that really resonated with me. It's on page 16, and I'm going to read it to you now. Detachment is understanding that we are never the cause of someone else's actions. See, right there, that stops me in my tracks. I love it. There's a big relief when I read that. I'm going to read it again. Detachment is understanding that we are never the cause of someone else's actions. That is such a huge statement. I mean, they should have told people this back in, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 minutes ago. There's so many of us that really think that we caused someone else's actions, someone else's situation, that we're the cause. It's our fault. And it's not, and it can't be. It's just not possible, right? We don't have that kind of power. We are powerless over everyone else. Situations, events, whatever it is, the only thing we have power over and control over is our own reactions, our own response. That's it. That's where your power lies. Let's read this. I love it. We live in a society that wants to blame others for every unfortunate situation that befalls us. Taking responsibility for the experience we have, particularly when they're unpleasant, is not behavior that comes naturally to us. Most of us likely pattern our ideas and attitudes after those we observed in our homes. Our parents mimic their parents too, no doubt. So this habit's had a long life. It controls how most of us see and think and behave. It has colored the attitudes of the people with whom we are sharing our journey. But it's time to stop this merry-go-round of blame. No one can cause us to act in a particular way. And we are not to blame for anyone else's actions either. Others' actions are theirs and solely theirs. Likewise, our choices about how to behave are ours. We might influence others or even be influenced, but the final decision about how one acts falls with one acting. We may not be all too happy about taking full responsibility for ourselves in every instant, nor in relinquishing the responsibility of how others behave, but we will grow accustomed to this and it will free us from many burdens. Time will prove this is to be true. Well, I'm here to tell you it's true. It's taken some time. I have grown accustomed to it and it's freeing. I had no idea how, when I think about my past and how I lived my life in this codependency, it, I get this feeling of muddy, like foggy, unclear. Everything's connected, really like a mosh pit, where everything is affecting everything else, right? Everything is connected to me somehow. It's not really clear. It feels vague and daunting. Like if I would have done something different, it would have been different, or they wouldn't have done that. All those feelings. So, I understand this. And since I have been able to practice this concept and believe it, it was, it's kind of that act as if thing. At first, I read it and I thought, boy, that sounds good, but I didn't feel it. But I've become accustomed to it and I believe it and I feel it in my soul. And I can feel it when I'm not doing it. When I'm in there, I get that murky, foggy, uncomfortable feeling again. Like, oh God, this isn't going to end well. I'm sure you know what I mean. But this first part up here about getting these, taking responsibility for everyone else is is a behavior we picked up from our parents. They picked it up from their parents. They picked it up from their parents. I think it's just kind of that human condition. And they say that your personality, your reactions, the way you view life, everything is formed within your first 7 years. So when you're thinking back, think about those first 7 years, right? And it's very interesting, and so we're trying to unlearn something that we learned at a very young age and we have counted on. It's become a part of who we are. And it's hard to recognize these things. It's hard to change these things, and it takes time. But it's true. And it's twofold here. I'm going to put a different slant on it as well. Not only am I not responsible for someone else's actions, I'm not to blame for theirs. And I don't know about you. I suffer from both, or I did. With my my qualifier, I'm going to say my qualifier, uh, I am to blame for everything. I'm the reason they're the way they are. I'm a reason that this is so terrible. It's my fault. And for many, many years now, I have taken that on. And I've said, you're right, it's my fault. I should have done different. I wish I would have known better. I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. And the truth is there's nothing I could have done about it. This is just the way it's supposed to be. I mean, it is what it is. So I had decided, I told you this last year has been a breakthrough for me on another level because I set a boundary with that. And I said, you know what? You may feel that way, but it's not true. And I'm not going to listen to it anymore. I am not to blame. And I'm not to blame that you're not doing anything about it. You want things to change and you say I'm the only one that can change them for you. You can't do it without me. And I see very clearly on the other side of this, that's just an excuse for them to stay stuck. So it's no different with any other situation. I mean, as soon as if you have an alcoholic or addict in your home and you come after them, what's the first thing they do? They blame someone else or they blame you, right? I got a good example of this. This is going to sound crazy, but I know this guy in Southern California, and he's kind of a gangster type fella. Uh, he's Hispanic. Um, born and raised in East LA, and he was a tough guy. Went to prison, the whole thing, and came out, and was an addict. And he was it's the typical demographic of this. I don't want to sound, like I'm pigeonholing people, but he had a very traditional Hispanic household. His father had died, his mother was in the family home, and he still lived there, right? He was like in his 40s or something, and he's still living with his mother. And the whole family's there, the whole gig. But he didn't move out, and he was drinking and doing drugs, and he was a heroin user. And he was in the garage, and he was sitting on like a sofa. They had like how it is. People love to do drugs in the garage, and they set up a little den out there. So he was out there sitting on this couch in the garage where him and his buddies would hang, and he had nodded out from the heroin. He did some heroin. He nodded out. The tourniquet was still on his arm. The needle was still in his hand, and he nodded out. It looks like you're asleep, sitting up. You've seen it before, I'm sure. And his mother came out in the garage and found him. And she was furious. I mean, this is a Hispanic mother, very Catholic, old school. And she took off her chancla, which is her sandal. And she took off her sandal, and she started hitting him in the head. Whack, whack, whack. Wake up! And he woke up, and she was hitting him with his chancla. And he went into natural form. He went into just right into alcoholic addict form, and he started crying. And he said, "What are you doing? Why are you hitting me? This isn't even mine. It's probably yours. This is yours." I mean, his mother was like 4 feet tall, this little Hispanic woman with a huge family who is running the show now. And he's telling her it must be her heroin, which is the craziest thing you ever heard. Now, he's sober now. And when he tells that story, of course, he laughs. He's embarrassed. He says, "Can you imagine? I was like 45, 46 years old, and I'm blaming my mother. I'm crying, living at her house, and I'm blaming her. It's really hers." That is so typical. So this mother knew she was not responsible for this. I mean, she took off her chocolate, start hitting. So not only are we not responsible for other people's actions, you know, we're not responsible for those consequences either. Like, what if the police would have shown up and arrested him? He'd still be blaming her. "This is your fault. You shouldn't have come in the garage. I told you to stay in the house," right? Um, and she would have to know that she didn't cause any of that. None of that was her. And I think that's the part that gets so crazy making about uh alcoholism, living in a world of alcoholism, whether it's yours or someone else's, is everything gets so delusional, and you start to feel crazy. You start to believe them. Now, the cue in my life, the qualifier, I just am going to start using that term. The cue in my life, I don't think I like that term, but I'm going to use it because it's just easier and faster to explain what I want to tell you. The cue in my life, you know, blames me for everything. And I think it's because they can't deal with the fact that they haven't been able to do it on their own. And for quite some time, I thought, well, that's okay because it makes them feel better about themselves, at least, right? If they could do better, they would. Until a doctor told me, you know, a doctor said to me, nothing's going to change if nothing changes. And you might have to rock the boat to get some change going here. And I didn't like the sound of that. And, I did it in slow incremental processes. I talked about this, I think last week, about the radio knob, right? The knob on the station. And so I turned it down, but it wasn't until I turned it off that I really saw a reaction, you know? Because what happens is this power play we have with people, this I'm going to take care of you, I love you, I'm going to take care of you at the expense of myself. And then we either get resentful, worn out, tired, right? And, or they resent it and they tell us to get away from them. And then it goes through a cycle again and it just goes over and over and over. And then I feel bad. So I come back, I try to love them more. Then they tell me to get lost, right? Or it's my fault. So I retreat. Then they came after me. I need you. I need help. I love you. And then I go back in, right? So it's this constant cycle and nothing's changing. Nothing's getting better. And to elicit that, he said, you're going to have to do something different. So what I did was I said, I set a boundary and it really did rock the boat. It still rocked. And I feel so much better. And I can see in the past, someone asked me, a family member asked me, well, don't you feel bad? Like, don't you feel bad that she's suffering so much and you feel better? And I said, it wasn't working. What I was doing wasn't working anyway. So why would I continue to do that and feel terrible and burn myself into the ground? And it wasn't working. Now it's not, nothing's working, nothing's changed, but I feel better. Right? So it's the lesser of two evils, I guess, but it's been freeing for me. And when I first started doing this, I said no, and it was like, what do you mean no? You've never done that before. You don't love me, and there the that cycle I just spoke about, it started. She was putting out the you don't love me, you don't care about me anymore kind of thing, which was triggering me to rush in and show her how much I loved her. And then we would have been in the cycle again. And this time I just stood back and said, oh no, I do. I do. I do love you. But I'm not going to let you talk to me like that anymore. Or, but no, I can't do that. Why can't you do it? Why can't you do it? Why won't you do it? I don't have to explain to you. I mean, it was just a completely different shift of energy. And it felt so much better to me. I can't tell you. And I don't even like talking to my Q anymore because all it is like an hour or two on the phone of that trying to catch me, trying to get me, trying to hook me. It's so unhealthy. And I set it up. I think that's what the sad thing is I could have, if I would have known what we're talking about right now, if I would have known this over a decade ago, I would, I mean, I shouldn't be doing that. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. But I mean, oh my God, maybe I could have saved us a bunch of trouble here. I mean, I didn't know. I just didn't know. And it all stems back from the way I was as a child. I wanted to be loved so bad. I wanted to make sure other people were happy and they felt loved. I don't want anyone to feel unloved like I felt. And it's rippled through my life. It hasn't just rippled. It's like a tornado going through other people's lives. And it had to stop. And since it stopped, I've become accustomed to it and it feels great. Now the problem I have is this. It's hard now because I've done it and I know how good it feels. And I see people in the other situation and it's so apparent. It's hard not to say anything. I have one friend in particular, and she's in where I was 10 years ago. And it's really it's really hard because, even like answering a question, someone will ask her a question on the phone, and she's got to go around this big explanation, whether it's yes or no. Just she has to explain herself for everything. And I said in the background to her, I said, just say no. Just say no. No, thank you. And hang up. And I realized I can't do that. I can't be telling her that. Because first thing, you can only see what you can see. Second, it's none of my business. It's none of my business who she's talking on the phone. It's none of my business how she behaves. She didn't ask me for help. But it's so hard now when you see it happening. I watched a movie. Was it on BritBox or Prime? I watched a movie. I'm going to try to think of what it was, but the whole family was so dysfunctional. It was like, oh my God. It was so apparent to me. And that's the one thing is you get clarity. And you get clarity and you can see it in other people, and you could see like, oh my God, I can't believe I was doing that. But I did it. I can see it now when I think back about my parents. I can see why I did it. It was normal, but I don't want that to be my norm. It's a relief to mind your own business. It's a relief not to react. It's a relief not to take on blame that people are giving you. And it's a relief not to blame someone else. Is it hard to take responsibility for my mistakes? Yes, it is. Nobody wants to do that. But because of the 12-step program I went through, it's much easier. And I'll tell you how it's much easier. I cleaned up everything when I did my steps. I looked at everything, cleaned it up, and now I live in 24 hours. So every night I do an inventory before I go to sleep. And I look at my day, and if there's something I messed up, I screwed up, it's wrong, I clean it up immediately. The next morning, if it's too late that night, I can't say anything. I ask God to forgive me, help me do better tomorrow. I wake up and it's a new day. I either make amends, tell somebody I'm sorry for what I did, but I clean it up every day. So much easier, so much lighter, such a wonderful way to live. I got to tell you. So I love the reading. I really, it is a relief. I feel bad, when I see people that aren't quite there yet, and you might be listening to this thing, God, that sounds good, but I don't think I could do it. Or you might be further along. There was a long time that I thought, yeah, that's correct, but I don't feel that way. And it's really one of those things. You take the mind and the body, no, you take the body and the mind will follow. So if you just go ahead and start telling yourself, affirmations are huge. Just tell yourself, I'm not responsible for this outcome. I'm not responsible for their consequences. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for me and my actions and my consequences. And then eventually the feelings will start following that. It'll slowly morph into, you will just know. You'll just know, oh, that's not even my fault, right? I've got nothing to do with that. Remember that thing I told you about play dead? Would this be going on if I wasn't here on the planet? Probably. Probably. So, you're not it's just a huge relief. I hope you got something out of this. I just love talking about it because it really is a freedom. And I'm not saying it's going to change other people, but like I've said before, the more work you do on yourself, the more of this you do, recovery, it's like a ripple effect. When you change, it sends out waves and vibrations in the ether, the cosmic world, and it starts changing everything else. Everything around you will change. And if that's happening to you now, you know, what happened to me was this. I started growing and changing, mostly because I had to. I was not going to make it. And I started this work on really being honest with myself and really cleaning this stuff up, finding out, where I started, where you ended, getting out of other people's business, all this stuff. And people started falling away. People left my life, or I left their life, or it just ended. They moved away. Things changed. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? Well, I could see now that on a vibrational level, it was shifting. And the outsides were starting to match my insides. Very interesting. Very, it's amazing. I mean, it really is that the only way to change what's going on around you is to change what's going on inside you. So I love talking about this stuff. Thank you for listening. I love you all. Don't forget to check the show notes. Lots of stuff going on in there. Join me for Mastering the 12 Steps. It is fantastic. It's always great to get another perspective on something, even if you've done the 12 steps in Al Anon or Nar-Anon. And this actually gives you the tools, the step sheets, the readings, the explanations, the meditations. It gives you everything you need to take someone else through the steps and help somebody on their journey to recovery. All right. So I love you all. Have a great week. And hasta la vista, baby.